Hi, I'm Evelyn of the Modern Needle, and I have just developed a sock knitting pattern that's on Ravelry. And I thought before we get into knitting the socks, I was just going to talk about some of the tips and tricks about knitting socks that maybe make you more successful. If you know everything about knitting socks, this video is probably not very helpful for you, but if you've only knitted a few pairs or this is your first attempt, then this is probably a good video for you to watch. So let's talk about socks. Toe-up socks in particular, or cuff down, doesn't matter, but I want to talk about the toe-ups for a minute. They do start off either with magic loop, or you can knit them on DPNs. Let's have a look. Circular needles, magic loop, means you have your cord attached to the two needles you did your cast on, like it says in your pattern. And here you are. I just did 5 stitches because I want to show you something with it before we move on. So we have the two needles, often they're numbered needle 1 and needle 2, because the bottom needle might have different instructions than the top needles. So you pick whatever the top and bottom is. Most of the time it makes no difference. It's just for instructions. How do I know which needle that I need to pull out and knit with? Well, it has the lead yarn attached. That is the needle that gets pulled out. Here we go. So now I have a needle to knit with, and my stitch holder has the needles that I'm going to knit over. So I don't know if you can see here, but my two needles are different sizes. I'm knitting these socks with, it is an Aran weight, so it's a 4mm needle. For these purposes, I don't know what I used here, maybe 325, and this is a 2. I use two different needles. This one here is usually whatever the pattern says, and this one here is a couple of sizes smaller. And the reason why I like that is number one, when I knit into them and I knit them, I can get into these stitches easy peasy. There is no strain on my hands at all. I can just knit them and it's perfect. I will always know which needle to pull out because it is the one that has the thicker one. Sometimes I even use two different needles because I knit a lot. So in here, if I want to pull them back through, this needle here is thinner. It just glides. If I'm not careful, sometimes I pull it right off the needle. So there we go. This is for the circular needles. Let's say I don't actually like circular needles, but my cast on is way easier on the circular than it is on the DPNs. So if this is the case, I can just pick up my needles and I can now transition them to my double pointed needles, and I can just knit them off, get rid of the cord, and do what I need to do. Let's talk about DPNs here for a minute. I have many of them, as you can see, and they're all the same. I use hair elastics to tie them together because the rubber bands, when they get old, they break and they stick to the needles like glue, and sometimes I can't get it off, or they'll mark a spot and it'll never be slidey again. So I don't want to wreck the needles. I use baby elastics to keep them together. Now, if you are a first-time knitter and you knit on these needles, I would start off with bamboo, or you're not secure in these. Any kind of knitting. The bamboo is a bit more grippy. The next one is the wood, and then of course your metal needles here. So if you knit on the bamboo needles and they hang sideways, your stitches are gripped to the needle. They will not slide off, where with a metal needle, it could be that needle takes right off and exposes your stitches. So what if I knit with double pointed needles and I'm really afraid that with all of this motion stuff, my stitches fall off? I buy inexpensive elastics at Michaels or whatever. They could be retainer elastics. I think these are the bracelet elastics that the kids use to make these elastic bracelets, whatever. Anyways, you can get a bag of these for, I don't know, $1.50, $2, whatever they are. I put them in a container and use them as I need them. If I just want to park my stitches, or if I'm afraid that they fall off while I'm knitting, just put a little bit of an elastic at the end of the needle. It doesn't matter. It works for all material needles. This adds like a little brake pad and they will not slide off. The advantage to these little tiny elastics is, number one, I can cut them off and I can throw them out if that's what I choose to do. Or they don't add any weight while I'm knitting. They don't bother my hand or anything like that. When I'm finished knitting and I'm afraid that my stitches will slide off, so let's, for example, think I have knitting in between here. I'll wrap it like this and do the same thing on this end here. My stitches are in the middle. They're not going to go anywhere. This adds truly like a brake pad. It won't even move, like, and I'm yanking on it. Nothing's going to happen to these stitches. They're not going anywhere. I also have little stoppers. They're just easy cord locks that you can pull on the end of your needles to lock them in. So if you throw them in your bag, nothing's going to happen to them. But really, any elastic will do. If you're just going to throw them in your bag to make sure that nothing's going to happen to them, you can use a household elastic. They're not going to stay on there long enough that they disintegrate and break. So that is totally not a concern at this time. That covers needles. These, of course, are the Addy lacer blunt tip. They're like the deluxe needle of the needles. My daughter's couch ate one of the needles, so when I and it's not given it back. So when my sisters went to Germany, they brought me another pair. This here is the blunt end. This is the lace tip end. So depending on what it is that I'm knitting, I might want to have a pointier end, or blunt end is fine. Once I have my spare needle, I can flip it to whichever way I want to go, and that is perfect. If my needles are old or new and they don't have the information about what size needle they are on there, you can get these handy little things. This one here comes from my Mindful kit, but I have others. I have the Chaigu and the Addy and a few others, but the yarn stores also have these things. Sometimes you find them at all different places. Anyways, if I can't read, there's no way that my naked eye could read what is on here. So there's two ways that you can find out what it says on there. I can take a picture and then blow it up and have a look at it that way, which is most of the time the fastest way to do it. Or I find my gadget and I try to push it through and I see what needle that is. And it is indeed a 325. That's one of the ways that you know it. That takes care of that. When you are knitting, you have to count your rows, or you use the measurement of your tape. For me, invariably, if I don't knit two at a time, one leg ends up a little bit larger than the other, even though I'm checking it 50 times. So what I do is, I used to have a paper, then I moved on to the row counter on the phone. However, this method here that I developed, I like best. I go to the dollar stores or wherever I see these. These are just little tiny baby elastics. Before I found these, I used the ones with the metal, and I used a crochet hook and I made my own and just tied the bottom here. However, I don't like anything gliding on the needles. It's almost like nails on a chalkboard, so I like these. Plus, I'll show you why I like them. I like the red and green, which I would consider this here red and green. Sometimes the true colors are kind of hard to find. It's almost like a traffic light thing. Red for me means end of row, watch out, something's happening, you need to increase or you need to pay attention. Green means it's marking whether it's the other side of the hem or the other side of something. But green means I can just knit over it. It's just holding a place for something for me. So let's say I'm knitting and here it's kind of hard to tell the end of the rows. So I like my tail flipped out. So this is always my end of the rows. And one of the things that I do have lots of, and I have them around me all the time, is these little bobby pins here. If I don't have the tail out, I can stick a bobby pin or move it up so that I don't have to look at the bottom. So how do I use the stitch markers? I use them like this, and you'll see why I like them. So I flip on my thing and I knit my 4 stitches, and or 5, whichever ones I had. Turn it, pull the cord out, knit my other 5. So normally this goes a lot faster. However, I have this camera under my face here, and in my elbow, at the crook of my elbow, I have all of these gadgets holding the camera and the lights, of course. So here, let's pull that out. I'm moving on to round 2. So here, I can just flip this, make my stitch, pick it up again, and here I go. I did not stop my work. I did not do anything of the sort, or anything, period. Okay. And I can knit back and do whatever I need. So invariably, I get to the end of the row, and this is my row is where the marker is moving on to. Should that happen, I'll show you. Let's pretend that here I just took out my, oh, here I'll show you. Because again, let's say this was from that side. I took the marker this way. I'll just take it and I flip it to the end of my thumb. Again, I do everything with a needle because it's elasticy, right? So I can just move on, go back around, and when I come back over on this side here, now I'm going to mix my sides up completely, but this is just a test piece so I can show you. I have it on my thumb so I know that I'm coming around. It's my reminder, and I'm looking at it because I'm knitting it so I don't forget. I'll just pull it off, put it back on. This is the first round of that second needle there, and I'm going to drop this off for a minute here so not to get confused, and I just keep on going. So eventually you have a sock circumference which doesn't have a ton of stitches on there. So what's going to happen is you're going to go around this side, move the stitch marker along, go around this side, move the stitch marker along. Now I'm going to use a bobby pin. I went around one time, and normally I would just put it wherever my new thing is, I'll stick it in. Once I do the second sock, I can kind of loosely compare, am I where I need to be? This is where that where I went around the needles one whole round. And sometimes you don't. If you have a shorter sock, that's not an issue. I'm just talking about if you're going to go all the way around and you want to add more rows. It'll be right here. Now, in reality, it doesn't matter where I stick this as long as I have one on here, because maybe I didn't set it up right and I don't want to get up to find where my bobby pins are. So I'll get it when I go to the bathroom or drink or whatever. When I come back, I'll just stick it in here somewhere. It'll let me know that I went around one time. And I like this system because I can have this in my bag forever. I can have it in my bag a week, 10 days, 3 hours, 5 years. When I come back, I know I'm so and so many stitches in and I went around one time. I can just pick it up and know exactly where I am as long as I have the pattern. You can take a picture of it if you're afraid that it falls out. I usually, as soon as I start a sock, I'll have the pattern if I printed it out. If I have it on my tablet, I turn on the tablet. I'll have my yarn sitting here, and I use yarn caddies for my yarn because number one, it is expensive, and number two, I can just throw it into my bag the way that it is, and it doesn't get anything on it. I can slide it closed as the cake gets smaller and nothing happens. Where was I? Oh, I can throw it in my bag or whatever. And half the time I don't remember what I did for lunch. I would like to say that I did, but I don't. So for me, easy things have to be the same all the time. That's just how my brain works. And I don't stress about it too much. This is just knitting and it's something to calm me down. When it upsets me, well, then I have to put it down a bit. But that doesn't happen very often because most of the stuff is, nobody dies here. It's just yarn and needles. Who cares? And it's my time, and that time goes anyways, whether I do something or not. So here I knitted the toe, and I just had a little bit left of that blue. So I thought I can cut that off and go right into the leg, or I can add it a couple of rows. I could have done just the blue, but I thought, well, I'll stripe it a little bit for the toe. And then whenever I run out, and I'm going to pick up the white to go with it. Because I did stripes, this is rather easy to do. So I knitted to where I was going to run out. And if you are on DPNs, you can actually, or even if you're on this thing here, you can go both sides of the needle. What do I mean? So let's say I ran out of the blue right here, but my white yarn is here. So what I can do is I can either take this back and make a clean transition, and if you don't care about that, you just leave your needles on the, you just leave the stitches on the needle. I'm going to get rid of these markers here because they confuse right now. Take it back to the beginning where my yarn is. I could go all the way back, it doesn't matter. Let's say my white is here because this is where the end of the row is, and I'll just start knitting from here. Now this bit here will be just a fraction higher than the rest because it looks like this. You can see it here because I have two different yarns, but, and this is knitted in a size 4. It is a very thick yarn, as you can see. If we have regular sock yarn, like the thinner sock yarn, which is this weight, who in the name of God is gonna know that this is what you did? And you won't be able to see the transition. It'll just look like this. Here you can see it because I have rather thick yarn. It's Aran weight, just below the bulky. So stuff like that doesn't stress me out. But as you can see, I can see it here. So what I decided to do is, here in Canada, you take the shoes off if you go to somebody's house, and these are boot socks or shoe socks. So I want this to be facing. So anybody that sees my feet sees this when I'm wearing them. So my heel will have to be on this side because this is where I decided I'm going to have this little jog, which doesn't bother me. But am I going to highlight it? No. These are my socks. I could give these to my kids. They take any socks, any mistakes, anything. They don't care as long as they get my socks. They're fine. So now, would I gift them or give them to somebody else? No, probably not. Well, maybe my friends because they like my socks too. But regardless, so unless I sit down and I flip up my legs, you're not ever going to see this. And even if once I walk on this a little bit, it'll mesh it together more and more and more. And I can tell you within a couple of weeks of me wearing these socks on and off, this will completely disappear. It'll just shrink in and make it all the same. No problem. Don't sweat the small stuff. And this is kind of it, what I want. Oh no, there was a bit more. So here you can see I have the heel, which is called a short row heel because we're knitting short rows over only parts of these stitches, which makes a little dome here. I knitted it in garter because I wanted to see, number one, how does it look and what happens. So what happens is that the garter, which is 2 rows, like each one of these garter rows here is 2 rows back and forth. It compresses a little bit, so it makes the heel look narrower than it actually is, because once you have it on, it'll stretch out like this when you wear it, and it'll have the proper dimensions. But when it just sits like this, it looks shorter because it compresses together. But I like it because it's nice and cushiony, and for walking on it, I think I will like it. That is always up to you what you want to do. The one thing that to note is the shape of the toe and the shape of your heel here is the same. The difference is that the toes start here. So when you cast on, you want to have live stitches on either side that travel this side and this side. And on the heel, you come from here and you knit up. But you want to compress it that it gives you like a wedge like this. I call it a hinge, but it's really not a hinge because a hinge kind of opens. It doesn't, but it looks like a miter here. That's what you needed to have so that it comes around the corner. That's the difference. Here you knit up and here you knit from the top down. Afterthought heels are you pick up the stitches around here, you knit your wedge, and then you cast off here, or you Kitchener it together, the same as if you come with cuff down socks. But the shape is the same. It is just different ways of achieving that shape. One more thing about the socks. If you used a Turkish cast on, it could be that your first few stitches here are a bit loose or not in the same tension as the rest of your knitting because it is just wraps. Don't stress about that. You take a needle, any kind of needle, and you just pull on it like this. It'll adjust your tension, and you just pull it out with the tail, and the tail is just going to get a little bit longer to remove the slack. That's all that is. You don't need to rip it out. You don't need to start over. You don't even need to be super tidy on that first one. And I tell you, when you do it the first or the second time, because you have such a tiny circumference on the needles, you'll be wobbly and you're going to think, I will never get it. But you will. You will. And if it doesn't look the way that you want it, don't sweat about it. Once you're up to here, go back, take the tip of your needle and just adjust your tension, and you're going to think, oh my God, I did this. And yes, you did. And yes, you can. So I wish you happy knitting. I'm going to have a few shorts of these and upload them that you can watch or not at your leisure, and hopefully they help. Happy knitting. Talk to you later.